In chapter 14, we're going to talk about understanding and preventing violent crimes. You know, our nation was born in the violence of the Revolutionary War. The Union remained intact after a bloody civil war that put brother against brother. And since then, America has been willing to fight for freedom. It also cherishes the peace and freedom at home, however, that others have fought to secure. But violence continues to exist. I mean, if you look back at 2010, there was one violent crime for every 25.3 seconds. And there was one property crime every 3.5 seconds. So this is a serious problem in the United States. Now let's look at the violent crime rate in comparison to other countries. You know, the United States has a very high violent crime rate compared with other countries. In 2010, the United States, with a population of 308.7 million people, had an estimated 14,748 homicides. That's a rate of about 4.8 homicides for every 100,000 citizens. Again, that's about 4.8 homicides for every 100,000 citizens. Well, compare that to England and Wales. They only had 636 homicides in 2010 compared to our 14,000. And their population was about 55.2 million. So they had a homicide rate of 1.15 per 100,000 citizens versus our 4.8 per 100 citizens. So as you can see, our homicide rate is a lot higher. Even for Canada, as you look, they only had 1.6 per 100,000 citizens in their country. So our homicide rate is quite startling when you look at it in comparison to other countries. Let's talk about the causes of violence, and it is difficult to pinpoint. Causes of violence are very difficult to pinpoint as causes of crime. Many suggest that readily availability of lethal weapons, especially handguns, are a major factor. Well, the colonial American, however, every household had a gun, and survival depended on these guns. Yet children did not shoot each other in their schoolhouses, and nevertheless, the gun factors have to be considered even today versus what it was back then. Things are a lot worse, and a major cause of violence may be the desensitization of violence, such as people watching these video games and movies. These movies and video games are so violent, they're saying that this could be a link between what causes violence to take place within our communities today. Let's talk about preventing violence from happening. Some of the prevention strategies that we can use. Violence prevention should be addressed by the community as a whole. Prevention should include strategies directed towards children and their caregivers, especially those children at risk of becoming delinquent, as well as these areas with high levels of poverty and single-parent families. Efforts should also be directed at situations or in locations where violent crimes cluster, such as illegal drug markets and certain places where alcohol and firearms are readily available, and physical locations that's conducive to crimes. As far as hate crimes are concerned, some people feel threatened by simply coming into contact with those people who they're culturally different from. No other nation is as culturally diverse as the United States. We thrust a lot of people together with different customs and languages and lifestyles and beliefs, hoping that they can coexist together peacefully. Well, unfortunately, this doesn't always happen, and severe tension can result between cultural groups and the people that are not like them. And as a result, these different things, because of the unknown, people don't understand. They tend to fear what they don't understand, and they often hate what they don't understand. So these are some of the problems that take place as a result of these hate crimes. Sometimes it's a lack of understanding that causes them to want to fight and cause problems with one another. Okay, as far as gun violence is concerned, you know, gun violence prevention programs are aimed at this type of activity, which often manifests itself in specific types of violence that can be addressed through community policing strategies. Gun violence can be considered as a three-phase continuum. The illegal acquisition of handguns, in other words, people are getting these firearms illegally. The illegal possession and carrying of firearms, as well as the illegal, improper, or careless use of firearms. All of these can become a problem, and that's what this straw purchasing is talking about. Straw purchasing deals with someone purchasing a gun for someone who shouldn't have it. They may be purchasing a gun for a convicted felon or something of this nature. Somebody's convicted of domestic violence. That's what straw purchasers deal with. So we have to be careful of this and make sure that we're targeting these type individuals in order to prevent this gun violence from happening in our communities. Let's talk about some strategies to deter gun possession and gun carrying. You know, strategies to deter illegal possession and carrying include municipal gun ordinances, weapon hotlines, directed patrols by the police, focusing on hot spots where disproportionate amounts of crime and violence occur, and focusing on individuals who are most likely to possess and carry firearms illegally, including gang members and people who are on probation. Let's talk about the reduction of gun violence as far as comprehensive strategies, because that's what we're trying to fight. We're trying to reduce these things from happening, and reducing access to firearms is one of the ways to do it. You know, children access prevention laws such as safe storage laws require adults to either store loaded guns in a place that's reasonably inaccessible to children, or to use some type of a safety device, lock or gun, so that they can't get to it. And if a child obtains an improperly stored or loaded gun, then the adult is actually going to be held criminally liable for that. Also, teaching gun safety behavior is important. You know, when adults fail to keep firearms secured and away from the others, or they fail to teach them about gun safety, especially children, they place their entire family and anyone else who comes near the house at risk. So, I mean, even for law enforcement, there was this one police officer, despite him educating his two young sons about gun safety, they ended up having an accidental shooting at his house once he went next door to see another neighbor. So even when we teach them, we still have to make sure that after teaching them, we store it in a place to where they really can't get to it, or we lock it up so that they can't have access to it, or it can cause problems for us in the long run. Let's talk about sexual violence. You know, rape is one of the 4 violent crimes that's being tackled by the FBI in its uniform crime reports. However, the FBI documents only forcible rape of females, excluding all other illegal sexual crimes. You know, rape or sexual assault is one of the most underreported crimes, and depending on the official source that's cited, the extent of the problem can be vastly underestimated. So in other words, when you look at what actually takes place versus what's being reported, the numbers are staggeringly different. So we have to be careful and make sure that we tackle these type problems in order to keep everyone safe out there. Let's talk a little bit about domestic violence, because domestic violence really, it affects everyone just as these other crimes does. Domestic violence is in an area where the system response has a real potential to save lives. Even people have been said to quote folks such as the man by the name of Robert Trendowski. He said, "We must remember that until we are all safe, that no one is truly safe." So we have to make sure that everyone is safe, and then that way, and through domestic violence, that's what happens, because this is a vicious cycle. If we don't stop it, then the children that are being abused, they're the ones who or watching this violence take place. They're thinking this is normal, and they'll go out in the society and they'll treat people the same way, thinking that this is normal. So we have to make sure that we address domestic violence, because again, this is something that affects everyone within the community, not just that family that's experiencing domestic violence. Let's talk about workplace violence. This is another thing that's on the rise these days, workplace violence, and it's a problem that definitely has to be addressed by employers. You know, this is another type of violence that community policing efforts, partnerships, and problem solving can help to address. You know, Occupational Safety, Health, and Administration defines workplace violence as any act or threat of physical violence, harassment, intimidation, or other threatening disruptive behavior that occurs at the work site. Now, it ranges from threats and verbal abuse to physical assaults and even, believe it or not, homicides. You know, it can infect the employees, it can be clients, it can be customers, it can be visitors. All of these things take place, so we have to be careful even in our workplace to put in these proactive approaches and teach about domestic violence and all of these different things within our workplace as well, because violence don't just stay in the streets, it don't just stay at home. Sometimes it trickles into our place of employment, and we have to be aware of this, getting the police, getting the neighbors, getting everyone involved to help teach us about these different things and what to do and how we can respond to these various things that are taking place. In summary, developing effective violent prevention tactics will require long-term collaborations. In other words, this ain't something that just happens one time and we have the problem fixed. This is something that's going to take some time to develop. The majority of hate crimes are motivated by racial bias and involve violence. Also, gun violence may be considered as a three-phase continuum, as I discussed earlier. Other violence includes domestic violence, child abuse, and workplace violence. So we have to make sure that we tackle all of these areas. Again, it begins at home. We definitely have to tackle domestic violence, because if not, that's going to trickle into other areas and cause our communities to be even more violent. So we have to address all issues.